What does it take to keep going when life throws everything at you? To push forward when every step feels like a battle? This is the story of a father who never gave up. A man who faced unimaginable odds, yet found the strength to rise above them all. Imagine waking up each day with more problems than solutions. Bills piling up, health deteriorating, dreams fading. Many would crumble under such pressure, but not this father. His story isn't just about surviving. It's about refusing to surrender, no matter what. Today, we take you on a journey through the trials and triumphs of a man who became a symbol of resilience. We'll see how he faced his darkest moments, felt the weight of every setback, and yet, with every ounce of courage, decided to move forward, not just for himself, but for the ones he loved most. But what was it that kept him going? Was it the quiet strength of a promise he made long ago? Was it the unbreakable bond of family? Or something deeper, something stronger? Stay tuned as we uncover the incredible story of a father who, against all odds, refused to give up. Our story begins in a small town where the father, John, lived with his young family. From the very start, life was anything but easy for John. He worked long hours in a factory, barely earning enough to make ends meet. Yet, he remained optimistic, always dreaming of a better future for his wife and 2 children. But then, the unthinkable happened. The factory where John worked shut down without warning, leaving him jobless overnight. With no savings to fall back on and the bills piling up, John quickly found himself in a desperate situation. He spent days searching for work, knocking on doors, filling out countless job applications, but every door seemed to slam shut in his face. To make matters worse, his youngest child fell seriously ill. The medical bills soared beyond what John could afford. Every day was a struggle to find the money to pay for his child's treatment, food, and rent. It seemed as if the weight of the world was pressing down on him. Friends and neighbors began to lose hope, whispering that perhaps it was time for John to accept defeat. But not John. Even when his health started to decline from the stress, he refused to give up. He picked up odd jobs, anything that paid a few dollars. He worked as a janitor, mowed lawns, and even sold his car, his only means of transportation, to pay for his child's medication. Through all this, he kept a smile on his face and hope in his heart, telling his family, "We'll get through this. I promise." Yet, just when things couldn't get any worse, a storm struck their town, flooding their home and leaving them with almost nothing. It was another blow, a moment when most would have crumbled under the weight of despair. As John and his family struggled to recover from the flooding, another devastating blow hit them. His wife, Mary, fell seriously ill. The doctors found a condition that required immediate surgery, a surgery that John could not afford. The family's small savings had already been drained, and now he was faced with yet another impossible decision. John felt a wave of panic and despair. For the first time, he felt the weight of his burdens crashing down on him all at once. He could no longer hide the strain behind a smile. He was tired, exhausted beyond words, and tempted to surrender to the crushing pressure of it all. His mind raced with thoughts. How much more can I take? How many more battles must I fight? At this moment, he found himself alone, sitting on the steps outside the hospital, his head buried in his hands. For the first time in his life, he wondered if maybe everyone was right. Maybe it was time to give up, to accept that he could not win this fight. But then, he heard a faint voice calling his name. It was his eldest child, Emily, standing by his side, her eyes filled with tears, but also determination. She looked up at him and whispered, Daddy, you always say we don't give up, so we can't give up now." Her words pierced through his despair like a beacon of light in a dark storm. John realized that giving up was never an option. He knew he had to keep fighting, not just for himself, but for his family. He wiped away his tears, stood up, and made a vow to himself. No matter how hard it gets, he would find a way. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of his toughest battle yet. John's moment of despair turned into a moment of clarity. He realized that the battle wasn't just against his circumstances. It was against the urge to give in. With renewed determination, he sought help wherever he could find it. He reached out to local charities, churches, and even strangers, telling his story and asking for support. To his surprise, a small community group responded. Moved by his perseverance and the sincerity in his eyes, they decided to help cover a portion of Mary's medical expenses. It wasn't enough for the entire surgery, but it was a start, a glimmer of hope in an otherwise dark situation. John didn't stop there. He used his old skills as a handyman and began fixing up things around the neighborhood, charging only what people could afford to pay. Every little bit counted. He worked day and night, driven by his promise and the strength he saw in his children's eyes. Slowly, bit by bit, the money started coming in. His small victories were adding up, and John could see a path forward, however narrow and steep it was. He was finally beginning to believe that they might just make it after all. But the real test of his resolve was yet to come. With renewed hope, John embarked on the long road to recovery. Every day was a new challenge, but he faced each one with unwavering resolve. As he continued his handyman work, word spread around town about the father who wouldn't give up. More people began hiring him, not just out of need, but out of admiration for his determination and spirit. The small community group that had helped with Mary's medical expenses rallied around John's family. They organized a fundraiser to cover the rest of the surgery costs. People came from all over, moved by his story. They donated what they could, offered words of encouragement, and provided meals and support to his family. For the first time in a long time, John felt he was not alone in his struggle. Meanwhile, he found a part-time job at a local grocery store, working the early morning shifts before his handyman work. It wasn't much, but it was steady, and it gave him a small sense of security. Mary's surgery was scheduled, and as the days grew closer, John held his breath, praying for a miracle. The surgery day arrived. John sat in the waiting room, his hands trembling, but his heart filled with hope. Hours passed, and finally, the doctor came out with a reassuring smile. The surgery was a success. John felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew there was still a long way to go. Mary's recovery would take time, and there were still bills to pay. But now, things seemed a bit brighter. The community had rallied around him, and he had rediscovered his strength. Through every moment of doubt, he held on to one truth, that perseverance could turn the tide, and even the smallest steps forward were victories to be celebrated. Yet, the journey wasn't over. The lessons learned were invaluable, and there were more hurdles to overcome. But John had proven one thing. He was never going to give up. John's journey taught us that life's greatest battles aren't won by those who never fall, but by those who refuse to stay down. Through his darkest days, he discovered that perseverance is more than just enduring hardship. It's believing in the possibility of a better tomorrow, even when everything seems lost. Today, John and his family are doing better. They're still rebuilding, but they're stronger, closer and more determined than ever. His story is a testament to the power of hope and the human spirit. So, whenever you feel like giving up, remember John's story and keep fighting.